Welcome to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project, where we're creating the blueprint to help you become the best human that you can be. I'm your guide and fellow optimizer, Christopher Camp. Today, our topic is finding balance in emotions, regulating your emotional flexibility and rigidity. Dr. Chris Stevenson is our expert here to help us work through this topic. He's a consultant in general internal medicine at Mayo Clinic, and he holds a master's of health professions education from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and a master's of science in management from Northeastern University. He's won multiple teaching awards, has led numerous CME courses, and is an associate program director for the internal medicine residency at Mayo Clinic, Rochester. Dr. Stevenson also serves as the vice chair of practice for general internal medicine and has led multiple workshops on emotional flexibility and leadership over the course of his career. Dr. Stevenson, welcome to the Human Optimization Project.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm very excited and I'm looking forward to diving into this topic. And today I've got three big questions for you that we're going to tackle here. So the first one, what is the concept of emotional flexibility versus rigidity, and why is it essential for success? The second thing I want to answer is I want to know, do I actually have big feelings that I need to address? Is this something I have to do? And if I do, why can't I just bury them deep down inside? And then lastly, I'm hoping that you can tell me what the steps are that I need to take to become a more emotionally flexible person. That sound good to you?
Sounds fantastic. Let's dive in.
All right, let's do it. So in that case, let's get started from the top. So what exactly is emotional flexibility versus rigidity? What's the difference between those two?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So first, emotional flexibility refers to our ability to regulate and respond to our emotional experiences based on the context, values, and goals. It's a way to maintain authenticity while also adapting to new circumstances and feelings. Now, compare this to emotional rigidity, which describes fixed, unyielding emotional patterns that resist change, even when that change would be beneficial. And Chris, I want to highlight how important this is. Emotions are crucial to the human experience and play a significant role in our decision making, in our relationships, in our health, in our overall well being. Being emotionally rigid is associated with depression, burnout, anxiety, interpersonal and relationship difficulties, and poor work performance. So, this is something that we need to tackle.
Well, good. Well, I mean, you hit on a lot of huge key topics there, and it's clearly impactful. And previously on this show, we've talked about the concept of emotional intelligence and unpacking what that is. And there are four main elements to emotional intelligence, with the first being self-awareness, the second being self-management, the third being social awareness, and the fourth being social management. How do you see this concept of emotional flexibility fitting into that structure of overall emotional intelligence?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think we're probably more in that self-management bucket. But again, there's going to be a lot of overlap here between all of those buckets and emotional flexibility. Because again, it is a cornerstone, it's part of our foundation for emotional intelligence.
Mhm. You know, one of the things I've noticed when we talk about these emotion driven topics, oftentimes it's really hard to identify them. So, can you explain to me a little bit of what it looks like when I do this well? So, if I do a good job of being emotionally flexible, what's that going to look like in my life?
Yeah, so there are several strategies for how we can manage our emotions. Let me highlight three strategies that I would say are beneficial for helping self regulate here. So the first is acceptance. We all have big feelings, everyone has feelings. And it's important to acknowledge our emotions without trying to change them. We all have emotions for a reason. You need to name your emotions, label them, and accept them. In fact, studies have even shown that just the act of labeling our emotions decreases their power over us. The second thing, reflectivity. We need to respond thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. And there are many ways to reflect. You can talk out loud, you can do reflective writing, you can talk to a therapist or a friend. Reflection is a powerful tool that helps us untangle ourselves from our feeling. And the third strategy is reframing, which is also sometimes known as cognitive reappraisal in the psychology literature. But what is this? Well, it's where we take an event, which maybe we initially view negatively, and we reframe it under a lens of something more positive. And I want to highlight, Christopher, this is not just being positive all the time. We know that being positive all the time doesn't work. So what does this look like? Well, let's say you have some event, a frustrating, critical comment. Someone gives you feedback. You could look at that and say, boy, that's going to be an attack towards me.
Right.
Or you could reinterpret the event in a different light. This is feedback that can help me improve, kind of a growth mindset lens. And now you have a modified emotional response because this reframed perspective leads to reduced negative emotions, promotes more positive feelings, and more of a growth mindset.
I love it. Well, I'll be honest, it sounds phenomenal, but it sounds very difficult. Very difficult. And so I'm looking forward. We're going to unpack and really squeeze you here to figure out exactly how we do that, how we become that type of person. Before we do that, let me ask you the opposite question. What does this look like when I'm doing it poorly? Let's say I don't have adequate emotional flexibility. I tend to be someone who's a little more emotionally rigid. What does that look like in regular life?
Now, you may feel it when it's done poorly. But I'm going to highlight here 3 things that you might notice if you are doing it poorly. So the first is ruminating. So this is when we focus on thoughts and we are unable to untangle ourselves from the emotions. You feel stuck. Harvard Medical School psychologist, Dr. Susan David, who's done a lot of work in a similar construct termed emotional agility, she calls this getting hooked on your emotions. And one thing I want you to think about your internal dialogue. We have this constant stream of a monologue playing in our head. And many of these thoughts are not based in fact. They're based in feeling. We can get hooked, especially if there are negative feelings that we're ruminating on. And this can lead us to the second maladaptive strategy, which is where we minimize, ignore, or rationalize them away. Are you familiar with the psychology experiment to not think about white bears?
Oh, yes. And I
I
bet you guess what I'm thinking about right now.
You are. You're thinking
Yeah.
about white bears.
Yes.
Everyone is thinking about white bears
Right.
right now just because I have mentioned them.
Yep.
And so in this experiment, participants were told not to think about white bears. And guess what? They all thought about them because it is almost impossible to minimize, ignore, to not think about things, especially when they're going on in our mind. And this can cause us to avoid situations which can contribute to negative feelings. And that can be detrimental, especially if some of those situations maybe could have been beneficial for us in the long run. The third maladaptive strategy is then rigid thinking or black and white thinking. Shades of gray exist. But when we're not emotionally flexible, we can get trapped into only one way of thinking. This leads us to be more closed, less open to new ideas, new thoughts, new experiences, even those new thoughts or experiences that could be beneficial.
That's excellent. I love the way you've broken this down here. So, the 3 things that you suggested are how it looks when we're doing it well: acceptance, reflectivity, and reframing. The maladaptive characteristics that you listed here: rumination, minimizing or ignoring, and then rigid thinking. I got to be honest with you. If I spend, if I look at myself in the mirror, I feel like I often spend a lot more time in that maladaptive category of ruminating, minimizing, ignoring, and rigid thinking. So, all right, you have my attention now. I know that I need some help. Let me ask you about this. One of the things I wonder is how emotional triggers play into this too, because sometimes we're talking about controlling something that often feels or seems uncontrollable. So, and maybe can you explain to me kind of what is an emotional trigger and how does that relate to this concept of emotional flexibility?
Yeah, that's a great question. So emotional triggers are stimuli. They can either be external stimuli. So this could be comments, situations, events, something happening to you from outside. Let's say someone ignores you or provides that feedback or criticism. Or internal triggers, thoughts, memories, physical sensations. So maybe remembering a past failure. You're lying awake in bed at night thinking, why did I say that in the meeting? And now you have that emotional response. You have been triggered for that. So when you have those emotional triggers, you should watch for the telltale signs of maladaptive strategies. So what we just talked about, are you getting stuck and ruminated? Are you avoiding minimizing? Are you acting impulsively? Now, one thing that we have not talked about yet is the physiologic response that happens when we experience these triggers.
Yes.
So anytime that we have a big emotional response, our stress hormones go up, our heart rate increases, our breathing increases. We start to actually feel physiologically the emotions that we're having. And so this can lead us to have a couple different strategies. I've been focusing a lot on something called top-down strategies. There's another group called bottom-up strategies. Have you heard of this concept before?
Not when it comes to emotions.
Yeah, so with top-down strategies, we're really using our mind to help us self-regulate. So this is using what we just talked about. It's reflecting, it's accepting, it's trying to use all of the strategies where we're reframing all of those different things. But when we're using bottom-up strategies, we're actually trying to use the parasympathetic nervous system, our autonomic rest and digest nervous system, to calm down, to try to get control of those feelings. So what might it look like? You could use grounding techniques. This is where you focus on sensory inputs such as touch or sound or smell. You could use breathing exercises to try to calm the autonomic nervous system. Physical activities like exercise can be helpful. And so there are many different strategies you can use to help respond to the emotional triggers, and not just from top-down cognitive ways.
Oh, that's helpful. Okay. We're going to come back to that. We're going to circle back to that. I really like that. One of the other things I wonder about, for folks that are in the workplace or part of a team, often you're situated in a hierarchy, and maybe you're not the person in charge. How do you balance, or how can emotional flexibility be more complicated for somebody who's not in charge? Because it seems like if I'm the boss or the CEO, I get to set the tone and I can change my mind when I want to. But what if I'm not? Well, what if I'm the person who has to follow through with orders given to me? How do you maintain emotional flexibility in a scenario like that?
That can be really challenging. So hierarchy can challenge flexibility by imposing external constraints. And so we've already talked about some of those external triggers. And then again, if you have a external constraint that is conflicting with a core value, that's going to cause internal dissonance. And now you will have internal triggers. So it's important, and it is possible, to remain emotionally flexible while seeking creative solutions that align with your values. So again, when we think about emotions, we always have to think, what are the core values that I'm trying to follow as well? And so I think that's a key component here, that how can you make decisions that align with your values so that you're not getting hooked on those feelings, knowing that sometimes you will have external constraints that are guiding you in one direction.
Mhm. That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, speaking of that, is there ever a scenario where maybe those external constraints are pushing me to be rigid? In other words, is emotional rigidity ever the right answer? Sometimes I need to stand up for my principles. I need to stand up for what
Mhm.
my beliefs are. I'm not going to be flexible and give in to what somebody else is telling me I need to do. Help me reconcile that.
Yeah, spot on. So I'm going to rephrase that a bit and say, rather than being emotionally rigid as the right answer, there are certain situations when core values or safety are at stake. And it's important that we stick with those values, especially if the decisions being made compromise your values of safety. It's basically, what are the hills that you're going to die on? What are the ones that you say, this is so important, I'm going to stay true to it because it is a core belief of my own.
That's excellent. That's incredibly helpful. Well, another question I have is this a problem for everybody, or is this just for the select few? It seems like some people are naturally pretty good at this, some are not. Is this something that everybody really needs to pay attention to, or just those that are struggling with controlling their emotions?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So first off, we're all humans. We all have emotions. Even those of us who say, no, I don't have big feelings, I don't have emotions. Well, I might challenge that person to say, do you have emotions, or are there things that you're really burying instead? Or are there things you're minimizing or ignoring? Emotions are part of the human experience, as I mentioned earlier, and we all have emotions. And so everyone experiences them. It's key to recognize the impact on behavior, on the relationships, on our own well-being and mental health. And we know that suppressing emotions often leads to negative outcomes such as stress, burnout, and even physical health issues.
Mhm. So would you tell that person that says to you, "I don't have issues with emotions. I'm not that emotional." What would you tell them to look for in their lives that may signal that there are some buried emotions that they haven't addressed?
Oh, that's great. So Everyone has feelings, just like I tell my kids, it's important to feel your feels.
Yeah.
And there's this great psychological construct called alexithymia, which literally means emotional blindness. Now, many people, especially those who have trouble articulating their emotions, can often only describe three emotions. And it's the common three that we always think of. It's happy, sad, mad. That's what we have. But we have an entire lexicon of emotions. Are you happy or are you elated? Are you in awe? That's one of my favorite emotions. Are you sad or are you really feeling shame, guilt,
Mm,
grief? And so these are all different emotions. And
mhm,
how can we adequately address them unless we accurately name them? It's
mhm.
crucial we name them if we're going to accept them. And so for someone who says, I don't have feelings, or maybe a red flag would be saying, not only do I not have feelings, but I feel happy all the time. Well, that's only one flavor of the emotional experience. What are all the feelings that you're having? And can you name more feelings that you have besides just the top three?
Mm. And it's just like us as humans to try to reduce it down to only 3, and I don't know what it says about us, but, it's unfortunate that when we do reduce it down to 3, it's 2 negative and 1 positive. Happy, sad, and mad. That's great. Well, what if I say, "Okay, all right, I recognize I do have emotions, but I've always been taught it's best just to bury them deep down inside, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I think that I work better if I just bury these emotions down and leave them there."
Yeah. So, first, studies have shown that burying does not work. In fact, if we bury our emotions, it will eventually come out in some other way, shape, or form. So maybe you had that critical comment, and then you now go home and you are still feeling that angst inside. And so what do? Well, maybe you now yell at the family pet or something.
Mhm, mhm.
There's that emotion is going to come out, and maybe not in such a benign way as just yelling at the dog.
Yeah.
So it is crucial to at least name and then try to address and accept that emotion. Because if you don't, it's going to come out with a vengeance someplace else at a time that's probably not very convenient.
Yeah, it does. It seems that it does come out when at a time that's not very convenient, and also you're probably not in as good a state to be able to recognize that as well. I think those are a couple of the potential
Spot
consequences
on.
burying them. All right, so if I do buy into the fact that I have emotions, that I have feelings, and I buy into the fact that it's not best for me to bury them any longer. Let's say I commit. I say I do want to get better at this. I do want to improve. Do you feel that emotional flexibility is an actual skill that I can learn and get better at? Is this like shooting free throws? The more of them I do, the better I'm going to get.
Yes, actually, it is. So, this is something that can be taught. Multiple studies have shown that with training interventions, people can improve their emotional flexibility and their general self efficacy. So, if this is something where you say, boy, I want to learn more, or boy, I want to improve this aspect of mine, this is absolutely within your reach.
Excellent. All right. So there's hope. You're telling me there's hope.
There's hope. There's hope for all of us.
All right. This does seem like one of those situations, though, that's relatively it can be complicated because is it a case where the person who struggles with it the most is the one who needs to improve, but is also less likely to recognize that they have a problem because they are struggling so much? So it's almost like the ones who need it the most might be the least likely to be successful in trying to improve.
Oh, that is such a good point. So, yes, there is evidence to suggest that people who have lower self regulation are indeed less aware that they have lower self regulation, particularly in context with emotional intelligence, emotional flexibility, and emotional regulation. So, this is where us as leaders, mentors, coaches, friends, we can partner with our colleagues, with our friends, and help them here. If someone is really struggling with alexithymia, they are unable to really articulate beyond that mad, sad, happy paradigm. Can we help them and explore? Or
Mhm.
even if it gets beyond that, are there health professionals that can help people explore this as well?
Good, good. Well, if somebody is new starting out on this journey to try to improve their emotional flexibility, what are some of the most common barriers or pitfalls that they need to be watching out for?
So the first, that this is a quick fix. I'm going to listen to a podcast, listen to this one right here, and I'll be able to solve everything with it, or read a book and be able to solve everything. And that's just not the case. This requires work. Self-regulation and emotional flexibility require time and effort. It's energy intensive to reframe your thoughts. It's energy intensive to reflect. And so it is going to require some elbow grease there. It's also incredibly hard to be rational and avoid maladaptive strategies in the moment. When you're feeling your feelings, the path of least resistance is to bury them or ignore them or minimize them. And it's important to pause, take that 30,000-foot helicopter view, step back and ask, what am I feeling? Why has it triggered this? So again, it's not a quick fix, and it can be really hard to do it in the moment. So pause, take the time necessary, label your feelings.
I love it. And I'm hearing there's a couple other things I would layer on what I'm hearing in your response there is like all the concepts we talked about on the Human Optimization Project. None of these are quick fix. This is not a life hack. This is not a shortcut. This is a process. And it's also a process that you start down this pathway and you continue to improve, but it's a part of you're looking for the journey, not just the destination, right? You probably never get to a point where you say, I got it. I've nailed it. I am emotionally flexible and perfectly balanced, right? There is no finish line to this, right? It's continuous improvement. Is that correct?
Continuous improvement. You are spot on.
Yeah. The other thing I'm hearing you say in there is give yourself a little bit of grace, because it sounds like you're not going to notice it in the moment. You are going to blow up. You're going to have issues. You're going to have moments of rigidity. And it's oftentimes not until after the fact that you'll recognize that. And that's part of the learning process. Is that true to say?
That is part of the learning process. And the more you do it, the more second nature it will become. So maybe rather than blowing up or feeling, you get that 8 p.m. email that just really grinds your gears. And rather than firing back on that immediate email, which I'm very guilty of, you're going to instead pause. And you've done this enough where oh, that trigger, that external emotional trigger that I just got, that email, I'm going to take a moment and pause and reflect before I send something right now. And I guarantee you that the email that I send after I pause and reflect is going to be much better than the one I would send in the moment.
I think we all have some personal experience, probably on the sending end and the receiving end of that example.
Yes,
for sure. So this is a little more of an existential question, but one of the things I wonder is, can I become more emotional flexible while still remaining authentic to myself? Or is this me just kind of giving in to the crowd and the masses and kind of doing how do I continue to stay true to myself in this?
I love that because absolutely. In fact, this is about being authentic to yourself. Feelings are a core part of who you are. In fact, I would argue that minimizing and ignoring them isn't being authentic. You're experiencing the feelings, they are a component of you. So address them, don't ignore them. It will help you with authenticity.
That's great. And what about to others? So speaking of authenticity, is being emotionally flexible allowing me to still be authentic with others? Or could this potentially be seen as a form of emotional manipulation?
Yeah. So intent is crucial here.
Uh-huh.
Are you trying to hide your feelings or use your feelings to manipulate others? Or are you authentically reflecting, labeling, and acting on your feelings to follow values? The intent is the crux there, the crucial part.
Great. So as I start this process and I'm trying to get better, you've told me this is going to take a long time. It's not a quick fix. One of the things we talk about a lot in this project is enjoying the process and having process satisfaction. And I think it's helpful if we can do that. We need to look for the small wins along the way. So, what are some of the things I can look out for that'll let me know that I'm heading in a right direction and I'm making some improvement?
Yeah. So, what strategies are you using when you're addressing your emotions? Are you feeling like you're getting stuck frequently? Are you ruminating? Are you ignoring? Are you feeling like there's always one answer and it's your answer? Again, that black and white rigid thinking. Or are you taking a helicopter view? Are you pausing? Are you labeling? Are you reflecting? Are you accepting? looking at the different processes you're using, the different strategies, that's a key way to identify how is your own progress progressing.
I love it. I love that you keep reframing it around those healthy versus the maladaptive characteristics. That sounds fantastic. So I think and you brought up a good point too. You should not just look for the healthy ones, but also look for the unhealthy, but in both sets. That's excellent.
Exactly.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so now I want to know you've got me interested. I see that first of all, I recognize this is something I need to improve on personally, for sure. I do see I could have a pretty big impact in my life. I want to talk about the actual steps that we take.
Yeah.
And I want the plan. And I know you can't just jot it down on a post-it note, but help me the best you can. How do I put this on paper? What are the things I can do? So, can you give me a step-by-step guide to this process?
Yeah, I'm going to reference Dr. Susan David here, our colleague from Harvard Medical School, because I like the framework that she outlines. She terms this as emotional agility because it encompasses a broader values-driven approach. Now, both concepts, emotional flexibility, emotional agility, they're both crucial for emotional regulation, but I like Dr. David's approach because I find it very applicable. So the first thing is to recognize your patterns. Are you getting hooked by your thoughts and feelings? Is your thinking becoming rigid and repetitive? So that's the first step. The second step, label your thoughts and emotions. When you're tangled up in your feelings, you are using mental energy. Your mental energy is being spent on that jumbled mess of the chatter in your brain. There's not enough bandwidth to truly examine your feelings there. So instead, take a step back, do the 30,000-foot view, pause, and specifically label your feelings. And again, remember, not happy, sad, mad, really label them, dig in. The third step, accept them. And again, we have multiple ways for doing this. Are we going to do top-down approach? Reflect. So talking out loud, reflective writing. Approach them with curiosity. Why am I experiencing this? And then the bottom-up approach. Activate that autonomic nervous system. Focused breathing techniques, meditation. And the situation may dictate how you act. If you find yourself spiraling out of control, you might not be able to reflect, and you might need to use that bottom-up approach first. And then lastly, act on your values. Is the decision that you're going to make consistent with your values? And we really haven't talked much about values, but that's a crucial component of this as well. And it can help anchor your decision moving forward.
I like that. So to recap, step one, recognize your patterns. Second, label your thoughts and emotions, accept them, and then act based on your values. Is that a fair summary?
Spot on.
I like it. And then that seems like a framework I think that is pretty universally applicable. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about this, almost all of these frameworks are going to have identify, label your emotions, and then try to make sure you're not getting hooked on those emotions, finding other strategies to move forward.
Well, earlier you mentioned, and I kind of paused it for a little bit. I wanted to come back to it. This top-down approach versus the bottom-up approach. The top-down approach, I love it. Accepting, reflecting, framing. It's a very cognitive approach, a very thoughtful, intellectual approach. When is that helpful? Because oftentimes I feel like an emotional issue can be difficult to treat or to fix intellectually. So when is it that I'm going to be able to use that top-down approach versus when is it that I need to use the bottom-up approach? Who benefits from it? Is there certain types of emotional errors? Help me sort through that.
Yeah. So the first I want to add is both approaches are rooted with evidence. We know that reflection, that talking aloud, even dictating and recording yourself, all of that can be incredibly beneficial for helping us untangle from our feelings. So it's evidence-based. Where I think you can run into challenges, as I've mentioned, is that if you are having the big feelings, it can sometimes be hard to start to use your prefrontal cortex, your mind, to then use that top-down approach, because your amygdala, the fight or flight, that part of your brain that is responding to threat is just firing off, and it can be hard to use that top-down approach. I find that when you are really spiraling and you're feeling those big feels, you're laying awake at night in bed because you just are hooked on something. Those bottom-up approaches can really help calm the mind, can help you regain control of the situation. Because sometimes there's just that sense of a lack of control. And being able to control your breathing can help you at least start to regain some of that control. And once you've done that, you can start to partner with those top-down approaches to reflect, to journal, to talk, to become curious.
I love it. I love it. All right, now talk to me a little bit as we start to wrap up here a little bit. Tell me a little bit more about the role of incorporating others. And I mean this
Yeah.
in both directions. So, what if I have somebody in my life that I recognize is emotionally rigid? How do I reach out to that person to help them with that problem?
So the first step is to recognize your own emotional volatility and how that can impact you. So don't just automatically think, oh, they're rigid. I'm clearly not rigid, and move forward. Recognize your own issues first. So again, that email at 8 p.m. and the personal issues, you maybe responded to reply right away, but pause, label your feelings, decide how you're going to act. The next step, get curious, not furious.
Mm.
Being curious and being open is a frequently cited strategy for helping deal with conflict. And there is actually science behind this. So do you remember mirror neurons from medical school?
Ooh, oh yeah, very, very well,
I,
very much so.
very well, of course. I'm gonna get a little nerdy here. So when we approach a conversation with curiosity, others in the conversation are also more likely to approach it with curiosity, and that's because we have these things in our brain called mirror neurons. And these reflect the signals that they're seeing from someone. So when you generally show an interest in someone's perspective, your body language, your facial expressions, your tone, it all shows openness. And the person here talking to, those mirror neurons pick up on those signals, and it fosters trust, safety, mutual understanding. And they are more likely to feel heard, validated, and opened up, which can enrich the conversation. So if you have someone who is really approaching things from an emotionally rigid standpoint, recognizing your own feelings, get curious, not furious, activate those mirror neurons, and you may be able to have a productive conversation. So keep this in mind when you're having those heated conversations at the Thanksgiving table.
Oh, I think this is great. And that probably works in both directions, I would think, too, right? So that having those types of conversations that are very reflective and mirroring is going to open up the door for me to talk to that individual, but it's also going to open up the door for that individual to talk to me and help me with my own rigidity. Is that true?
Spot on. You're absolutely correct. And again, this gets to the intent here, because none of this is done with an intent of manipulation. You're not trying to manipulate someone's mirror neurons here. You're truly doing this because you want to be open as well. You may learn something from someone who has a different opinion from you, even if they're being emotionally rigid. And being open can help at least drive that conversation and maybe have them start to experience a little more emotional flexibility.
Dr. Steven, this is fantastic. So we're going to summarize things for our audience here. So we've been discussing emotional rigidity versus flexibility today. Our topic was finding balance in emotions, regulating your emotional flexibility and rigidity. And there's a number of big take home learning points for me. One is that I think that we all have emotions, and even those that think that we don't are probably guilty of just burying them deep down. And there's a lot of evidence that suggests that maladaptive things are, it's a maladaptive behavior to bury those down, and they typically come up. I also love the framework that you gave us with the healthy characteristics versus the maladaptive characteristics that we could look for to see how we're behaving with the healthy characteristics being accepting, reflecting, and reframing, and watching out for those maladaptive characteristics where we ruminate, we minimize or ignore, and then have very rigid thinking. So I think that is a great litmus test for us to see how well we're doing in this. If we're spending more time minimizing, ignoring, and being rigid, we're probably on the wrong end of this. We're being much more rigid than we are flexible. And as you mentioned, that's also a great way for us to tell if we're making progress. You mentioned that this is a process. It's going to take a long time. You got to give yourself some grace. Try to find some small wins along the way. And then if you wouldn't mind maybe recap for us those big three questions that I asked you at the very beginning. So the first question I had, what exactly is emotional flexibility versus rigidity, and why is it essential for our success?
Yeah, exactly. So again, emotional flexibility, it's how we respond and regulate those emotional experiences based on the context, values, and goals, maintaining authenticity in new circumstances, feelings. And that emotional rigidity is the fixed, unyielding emotional patterns that resist change, even when adapting would be beneficial.
And our second question, you answered in multiple ways, but do I actually have big feelings that I need to address, and why can't they just stay buried?
Yes, you do have big feelings that need to be addressed. We all have feelings. We're all human. Burying, ignoring leads to more maladaptive strategies that impact our well-being. It's best to label, acknowledge, accept, and move forward rather than being stuck.
Excellent. And one last time, what are the steps that I can take to become a more emotionally flexible person?
Lots of frameworks. I particularly enjoyed Dr. David's. She has a fantastic resource on emotional agility, including a wonderful article in the Harvard Business Review as well. That's a great primer on it if there's more resources that you want to explore there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, okay, optimizers, there you have it. Dr. Chris Stevenson just did a tremendous job talking us through this session, finding balance in emotions, regulating your emotional flexibility and rigidity. This was a huge concept with a lot of value and great take home points. Thank you very much, Dr. Stevenson.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
To our audience, thank you for joining us. As always, remember to live intentionally, consistently, better. Keep striving to be the best human you can be and never stop optimizing.
Thanks for listening to the Mayo Clinic Human Optimization Project. If you like this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review. It helps others find us. Know someone who might benefit? Share the episode with them to join us in our mission to help as many people as possible become the best humans they can be. Have feedback or a topic idea? Email us at optimize@mayo.edu. And be sure to look for us on Instagram, X, and YouTube.
This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be relied upon for medical, professional, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for any questions. The appearance of any guest does not imply an endorsement of them, their employer, or any entity they represent. The views and opinions expressed by the guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Mayo Clinic. Reference to any product, service, or entity is for informational purposes only and does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by Mayo Clinic.